I could feel their eyes on me, hundreds of them, tracking my every move as I stood at the edge of the ceremonial grounds. The scent of pine needles crushed underfoot mixed with wood smoke and anticipation, an intoxicating blend that made my head swim. Autumn had painted the forest surrounding our pack territory in flames of amber and gold, but tonight, beneath the harvest moon, the atmosphere burned with something far more primal than seasonal change. The annual mating ceremony was not meant for someone like me. The thought wrapped itself around my throat, tightening like the simple linen dress that marked my lowly status. Everyone knew the alpha would choose a worthy female. Strong, vocal, capable of standing beside him as he led the Northern Pines pack through the coming winter and beyond. Not someone who hadn't spoken a word since her 12th birthday, not an omega. My fingers instinctively reached for the small wooden pendant hanging at my throat, worn smooth from years of anxious touches. My grandmother had carved it before she died. A wolf with its head thrown back in silent howl. "Your voice may be locked away, Ilara," she'd whispered as she pressed it into my palm, "but your spirit speaks volumes." The memory brought warmth, even as the crisp night air raised goosebumps on my bare arms. Around me, the other candidates preened and positioned themselves closer to the ceremonial fire pit, where soon the alpha would appear. Their laughter cut through the night like glass, their whispered comments reaching my sensitive ears despite their efforts. "Why is she even here?" A tall brunette tossed her hair over her shoulder, amusement dancing in her eyes. "Can you imagine an alpha with a mute mate? The pack would become a laughingstock." Her companion, a fierce redhead named Diana, who had made my childhood particularly miserable, snickered. "Perhaps she thinks she can seduce him with her silence. Men do enjoy quiet women." I kept my gaze fixed on the ground, allowing my ash-blonde hair to fall forward and shield my face. Years of such treatment had taught me to become smaller, to fade into backgrounds, to exist in the periphery of pack life where I served as a healer's assistant. Seen only when needed, heard never. The drums began then, a heartbeat rhythm that resonated through the earth beneath my bare feet. The crowd parted like a wave, and I caught my first glimpse of him. Alpha Nikolai Ravencroft. He moved with predatory grace, power contained in every step. Moonlight gleamed off shoulders broad enough to carry the weight of our entire pack's future. His face, angular and severe, gave nothing away as his gaze swept across the gathered females. Even from this distance, I could see the amber glow of his eyes. Wolf eyes, assessing, judging. This was the man who had taken control of our struggling pack 2 years ago, when the previous alpha died without an heir. An outsider with a reputation for ruthlessness, but also for justice. Under his leadership, our territory had expanded, food had become plentiful, and rival packs had learned to respect our borders. Yet he remained unmated, alone at the apex of power. Until tonight. Elder Marin, her silver hair catching the firelight, stepped forward to address the crowd. Her voice, wavering with age but strong with authority, carried across the clearing. For generations, the Northern Pines pack has honored the sacred tradition of the mating ceremony. Tonight, our alpha seeks his true mate, the one whose spirit calls to his own. Her gaze traveled meaningfully across the line of hopeful females. "Who among you will step forward to be tested by the ancient rites?" One by one they did, beautiful, strong women, warriors and hunters, daughters of respected families, each approaching the alpha with confidence, each meeting his gaze with determination. And one by one, they failed. Some couldn't complete the traditional dance that demonstrated grace and endurance. Others faltered during the exchange of blood that tested compatibility. Still others simply wilted under Nikolai's intense scrutiny, their confidence evaporating like morning dew under a harsh sun. Diana was the last of the obvious contenders. Her performance was flawless, her movements during the ritual dance powerful and seductive. The crowd murmured approvingly. Even I had to acknowledge her skill, though my stomach twisted with memories of her cruelty. But when she and Nikolai exchanged the ritual drop of blood, his from his palm, hers from her wrist, there was no reaction, no glow, no sense of recognition that pack lore promised would appear when true mates connected. Nikolai's face darkened as Diana stepped back, her expression a mixture of shock and humiliation. He turned toward Elder Marin, his voice a low growl that nonetheless carried to where I stood. Is this all? Are these the best females the Northern Pines can offer? The elder's weathered face remained impassive. There are others present who have not stepped forward. His gaze swept the crowd again, and impossibly, inexplicably, it landed on me. I couldn't breathe, couldn't move, couldn't even lower my eyes as protocol demanded when an Omega faced an Alpha's attention. Something in his stare held me captive, a question I couldn't answer even if I'd had the voice to do so. You. He pointed directly at me. Step forward. A collective gasp rippled through the gathering. Someone, Diana, I thought, laughed outright. Alpha, she's mute, called a voice from the crowd. An Omega, barely part of the pack at all. His expression didn't change. I said, step forward. My grandmother's pendant seemed suddenly heavy against my skin, as though pulling me toward him. My feet moved of their own accord, carrying me past the astonished faces of the other women, through the parting crowd, until I stood before him. Up close, he was even more intimidating, taller than I'd realized, with a scar that cut across his right cheekbone, testament to battles won and leadership earned through blood. His scent enveloped me, pine and smoke, and something uniquely male that made my wolf stir within. Your name? He demanded. Elder Marin answered for me. Ilara Moonshade, Alpha. She lost her voice after watching her parents die in the territory dispute 12 years ago. She serves as the healer's assistant. Something flickered in his amber eyes. Recognition? Curiosity? I couldn't tell. He circled me slowly, and I forced myself to stand straight, though every instinct screamed for me to bow my head, to show submission as an Omega should. The healer speaks highly of your skills, he said, surprising me. I hadn't known Healer Leora had mentioned me to the Alpha at all. She says your hands know how to mend what is broken. I offered a small nod, the most I dared communicate, yet you've never participated in a mating ceremony before. Why now? I had no answer to give. Truth be told, I hadn't intended to participate at all, merely to observe, as I did most pack activities. Being here at the edge of the gathering was as close as I usually came to belonging. Elder Marin cleared her throat. All unmated females of age are welcome at the ceremony, Alpha, even if they choose only to witness. Nikolai's eyes narrowed. I didn't ask you, Elder. His focus returned to me, intense and unrelenting. Dance. The command hung in the air between us. The ceremonial dance was complex, with movements that mimicked the hunt, the submission, the partnership between mates. I had never been taught its steps. Such training wasn't wasted on Omegas who would never be chosen. Diana's laugh cut through my paralysis. She doesn't know how, Alpha. How could she? No one would bother teaching an Omega the sacred rituals. I expected him to dismiss me then, to send me back to my place in the shadows. Instead, his jaw tightened. Then we'll proceed to the blood test. Another gasp from the crowd. To skip the ceremonial dance was unprecedented. Elder Marin stepped forward, concern etched on her face. Alpha, the traditional sequence, is mine to alter if I choose. He cut her off, his tone brooking no argument. He drew a small ceremonial blade from his belt, the same one he had used with all the others. Your wrist. Heart hammering against my ribs, I extended my arm, palm up. The blade glinted in the firelight as he drew it across my wrist. A shallow cut, just enough to draw a single drop of blood. Then he did the same to his palm. When our blood mingled, the world stopped. A warmth like summer sunshine flooded through me, starting where our blood had mixed and radiating outward until even my fingertips tingled with it. Nikolai's eyes widened, the amber darkening to molten gold as his pupils dilated. The crowd fell silent. Even the night creatures of the forest seemed to hold their breath. Impossible, Diana whispered, but the word carried in the stillness. Nikolai's voice, when he finally spoke, had roughened to something barely human. The ceremony is complete. I have found my mate. His declaration should have been the end, the moment of triumph, of acceptance. Instead, a low murmur rose from the gathered pack members, confusion and disbelief turning quickly to outrage. An Omega cannot be Luna. She has no voice to speak for us. The Alpha needs strength beside him, not weakness. Each word struck like a physical blow. and I found myself taking a step backward, away from the anger directed at me. But Nikolai's hand caught mine, his grip firm but not painful, holding me in place beside him. "Silence," he roared, and the forest itself seemed to tremble. As the protest died away, I felt the weight of what had just happened settle over me. I, Ilara Moonshade, the silent Omega, had been chosen as mate to the most powerful alpha in the territory, and I had no idea what would happen next. The walk back to the pack house stretched before me like a gauntlet. Nikolai's hand remained firmly around mine, his touch both anchor and shackle in the storm that had become my life in the span of moments. The ceremonial grounds emptied behind us, pack members dispersing in small groups, their whispers following us like autumn leaves caught in a breeze. My thoughts raced faster than my heartbeat. What did this mean? What would be expected of me? As Luna, I would need to stand beside the alpha, to help mediate pack disputes, to lead the females, all roles that seemed impossible without a voice. "Breathe," Nikolai murmured, low enough that only I could hear. "Your scent is sharp with fear." I hadn't realized I'd been holding my breath. I inhaled deeply, trying to calm the trembling that had started in my core and worked its way outward. The night air filled my lungs, carrying his scent with it, that same pine and smoke, but now laced with something else. Something that called to the wolf inside me in ways I didn't understand. We reached the massive log structure that served as both the alpha's residence and the pack's gathering place. Guards stationed at the entrance straightened as we approached, their expressions carefully neutral, though their eyes betrayed their shock as they took in our joined hands. "Summon my council," Nikolai ordered one of them, "and healer Leora." The guard nodded and disappeared inside. Nikolai guided me through the entrance, past the great hall where pack meetings were held, and up a sweeping staircase I'd never had cause to ascend before. The upper level of the pack house was the alpha's private domain, forbidden territory for most pack members, especially one of my status. He led me to a study lined with bookshelves and dominated by a massive wooden desk. A fire crackled in the hearth, casting the room in amber light that reminded me of his eyes during the ceremony. He released my hand only to pour water from a pitcher into a glass, which he then offered to me. "Drink," he said, not unkindly. "Then sit." I accepted the water gratefully, my throat parched from nerves. As I sipped, I took the opportunity to study him more carefully. In the firelight, away from the ceremonial setting, he seemed both more and less intimidating. The hard lines of his face were softened somewhat, revealing a weariness I hadn't noticed before. How exhausting it must be, I thought suddenly, to always maintain the facade of the invulnerable alpha. He watched me watching him, his expression unreadable. "You're wondering why I chose you." It wasn't a question, but I nodded anyway. "I didn't," he said simply. "The blood ritual did." My brow furrowed in confusion. "The blood doesn't lie, Ilara. When true mates meet, there is recognition on the most primal level." He moved to stand before the fire, its light silhouetting his powerful form. "I've seen it happen only once before, with my parents. Most matings are political, convenient. Partnerships forged for the good of the pack." A muscle worked in his jaw, but true mates, that's something else entirely. The door opened before I could process his words, admitting 5 people, 4 men and 1 woman. The pack's inner council, along with healer Leora, their reactions to my presence ranged from shock to outright hostility. "Alpha," began a gray-haired man I recognized as Thaddeus, the pack's chief enforcer. There must be some mistake. Nikolai's posture shifted subtly, his shoulders squaring as he faced his council. "There is no mistake. The blood ritual confirmed it. But she's," began another council member. "My mate." Nikolai cut him off, his tone leaving no room for argument. "And your future, Luna." Healer Leora, a woman of middle years with kind eyes that had always treated me with respect, stepped forward. Unlike the others, she appeared more curious than disturbed. "The blood ritual is sacred and ancient, older than our pack laws," she said thoughtfully. "If it recognized a true mate bond, that supersedes all else." Thaddeus shook his head vehemently. "An Omega cannot lead. She has no voice, no standing. The neighboring packs will see this as weakness." "They will see it as whatever I tell them to see it as," Nikolai growled, a dangerous edge entering his voice. I sat perfectly still, feeling like a rabbit caught between warring wolves. This was exactly what I had feared, that my presence would undermine Nikolai's authority, would threaten the stability he had brought to our pack. Slowly, deliberately, I rose from my seat. 5 pairs of eyes tracked my movement as I crossed to a small writing desk in the corner. Finding parchment and a quill, I wrote quickly, then returned to hand the note to Nikolai. He read it silently, his expression softening almost imperceptibly, before he turned to address the council. Ilara suggests that we postpone any decisions until morning, after the ceremonial bonding is complete. She believes, and I agree, that the strength of our mating bond will answer many of your concerns. The ceremonial bonding. My heart skipped at the words. Among werewolves, the bonding that followed the mating ceremony was a sacred, private ritual between mates. It would forge a mental link that would allow us to communicate without words. A connection that would, in theory, bypass my muteness entirely, if it worked. The council members exchanged glances, clearly unhappy but unwilling to directly challenge their alpha. There is wisdom in waiting, Healer Leora said into the tense silence. The bonding may reveal much. Very well, Thaddeus conceded grudgingly. But Alpha, you must consider the pack's future. If this mating proves problematic. It won't. Nikolai's voice had dropped to a dangerous rumble. You're dismissed. After they filed out, only Healer Leora remained. She approached me with a gentle smile that crinkled the corners of her eyes. I always knew there was more to you than others saw, she said softly. Your hands speak volumes in the healing rooms. Perhaps your heart will do the same with your mate. I managed a small smile in return, grateful for her kindness amid the storm of disapproval. She turned to Nikolai. The ceremonial chamber has been prepared, Alpha. The herbs and oils you requested are laid out. With a respectful nod to us both, she too departed, closing the door softly behind her. Alone again, the silence between us stretched taut with unspoken questions. Nikolai moved to the window, staring out at the moon-drenched forest beyond. You should know, he said without turning, that I had no intention of finding a true mate tonight. I expected to make a political match, nothing more. His hands clasped behind his back, knuckles white with tension. I have enemies, rival packs who would see the northern pines fall. A mate, any mate, would be in danger simply by standing beside me. I moved to join him at the window, careful to keep a respectful distance. Outside, the moon painted silver pathways through the trees. Somewhere in those woods, my parents had died defending pack territory when I was just a child. The memory of their broken bodies, of the river of blood soaking into pine needles, had stolen my voice that day. The trauma had locked away my words so completely that even my wolf form remained silent, unable to howl with the pack during runs. Yet here I stood, chosen by fate to be the voice of the pack women, the partner of the most powerful wolf in the territory. Nikolai turned to face me, his amber eyes searching my face. You're afraid, he observed. Not of me, I think, but of failing. I nodded, surprised by his perception. I understand fear, Ilara. I've lived with it since I became Alpha. The admission seemed to cost him something. Not fear for myself, but for those under my protection, fear of making the wrong choice, of leading the pack into danger. His honesty touched something within me. On impulse, I reached for his hand. He allowed the contact, his much larger hand engulfing mine. I traced letters onto his palm. WHYME. Why you? He gave a short laugh that held little humor. I've been asking myself the same question since the moment our blood mingled. His fingers curled around mine, perhaps because you understand silence. Perhaps because, like me, you've survived loss and emerged stronger. He released my hand and moved away, the vulnerability of the moment passing like a cloud across the moon. We should proceed to the ceremonial chamber. The bonding ritual must be completed under this moon. My heart fluttered against my ribs like a captive bird. The bonding ritual was intensely private, something I had only heard whispered about among the mated females of the pack. It involved an exchange of blood far more significant than the testing drop at the ceremony, followed by a spiritual joining that would bind our wolves together. And traditionally, it culminated in a physical consummation. Heat crept up my neck at the thought. I had never been close to any man, let alone one as intimidating as Nikolai. As an Omega, I had assumed I would either remain unmated or eventually be paired with another low-ranking pack member. Never in my wildest dreams had I imagined being claimed by an alpha. "Come," Nikolai said, his voice gentler than I had yet heard it. "Whatever happens, we will face it together. Together." The word echoed in my mind as I followed him through the pack house to a section I had never entered before. The ceremonial chamber was located in the oldest part of the structure, its thick wooden door carved with ancient pack symbols. Guards stationed outside bowed deeply as we approached, then stepped aside. Nikolai paused, his hand on the door handle. "Once we enter, there's no turning back. The bond, once forged, is unbreakable." His eyes, intense in the dim light of the corridor, held mine. "If you have doubts, Alara, now is the time to express them." Did I have doubts? 1,000. But beneath them ran a current of something else, a pull toward this man that defied explanation. The blood ritual had recognized something between us that transcended pack hierarchy and the limitations of my silent existence. I reached up and touched my grandmother's pendant, drawing strength from its familiar contours. Then, decision made, I stepped forward and placed my hand atop his on the door handle. Together, we pushed the door open. The ceremonial chamber glowed with the light of dozens of candles, their honey scent mingling with the aromatic herbs strewn across the stone floor. In the center stood a raised platform draped in furs, surrounded by small braziers burning fragrant oils. Ancient symbols had been painted on the walls in what looked like silver paint, glimmering in the candlelight. Nikolai led me inside and closed the door behind us, the sound of the latch echoing in the sacred space. When he turned to face me, something had changed in his demeanor, a softening around the edges, as though some of his carefully constructed walls had begun to crumble. "In this room," he said quietly, "there is no Alpha and Omega. There are only two wolves, following a path as old as our kind." He reached for me then, his fingers brushing a strand of ash-blonde hair from my face with unexpected gentleness. The touch sent a shiver down my spine that had nothing to do with fear. "Are you ready, Alara Moonshade?" he whispered. To become my true mate, I gazed up at him, this fierce, solitary man who had somehow been chosen for me by forces beyond our understanding. In his eyes, I saw not just the dominant alpha, but glimpses of the man beneath, one who carried the weight of our entire pack on his shoulders, who understood duty and sacrifice. One who perhaps understood silence as I did. I nodded, and took the first step toward our shared destiny. The ceremonial knife gleamed in the candlelight, its blade inscribed with symbols so ancient that even our pack elders could only guess at their original meanings. Nikolai lifted it from its velvet cushion with reverence, his movements deliberate and controlled. "The bonding requires blood freely given," he explained, his voice low and resonant in the chamber's hushed atmosphere. "More than the ceremonial drop. Our wolves must recognize each other through taste and scent." My pulse quickened as he approached. I had assisted healer Leora in enough rituals to understand the theory of what was about to happen. But experience was another matter entirely. We would each make a small cut on our wrists, deeper than the testing nick from earlier. Our blood would mingle, and we would each taste the mixture. A primal exchange that would begin the bonding process. Nikolai held the knife between us, its silver blade catching amber reflections from the surrounding candles. "I'll go first," he said, his eyes never leaving mine. With a swift, practiced motion, he drew the blade across his inner wrist. Blood welled immediately, darker and richer than I expected, almost black in the dim light. He extended his arm toward me, a silent offering. My hands trembled slightly as I accepted the knife from him. The handle was warm from his grip, the weight of tradition and expectation making it seem heavier than its physical form. I mirrored his action, drawing the blade across my own wrist. The sting was sharp, but fleeting, replaced immediately by the curious warmth I had experienced during the ceremony. When I looked up, Nikolai's eyes had darkened, the amber now shot through with gold as his wolf rose closer to the surface. He took my bleeding wrist in his hand and brought our wounds together. The contact sent a jolt through me like lightning seeking ground, a current of sensation that raced along my nerves and settled somewhere deep in my core. A small sound escaped me, not quite a gasp, more a release of breath I hadn't realized I was holding. "The first part of the bond forms now," he murmured, his voice roughened. "Feel it, Alara. Don't fight it." I couldn't have fought it if I'd wanted to. The sensation was overwhelming, a warmth that spread from our joined wrists throughout my body. Settling into my bones like the memory of summer sunshine, my wolf stirred within, pressing closer to my human consciousness than she had ever been, curious and eager. Nikolai lifted our joined wrists to his mouth, and his eyes locked with mine, ran his tongue along the mingled blood. The intimacy of the gesture made heat bloom across my skin. His pupils dilated further, a growl rumbling in his chest that was more wolf than man. "Your turn," he said, his voice barely more than a rasp. Heart hammering against my ribs, I leaned forward and tasted our mingled blood. The flavor was metallic and rich, earthy and primal, and beneath it all, something uniquely Nikolai, something that called to my wolf with a siren song of recognition. The effect was immediate and overwhelming. My senses sharpened dramatically. Suddenly, I could detect the individual components in the burning herbs, could hear Nikolai's heartbeat accelerating to match my own, could see minute details in the ceremonial chamber that had been invisible moments before. But most striking was the presence I felt forming at the edges of my consciousness. A shadow that was distinctly not me, yet somehow familiar. Nikolai. His essence, pressing against the borders of my mind, seeking entry, his eyes widened. "I can feel you," he whispered, sounding almost awed. "Like sunshine breaking through clouds." I understood what he meant. If he was shadow in my mind, I must be light in his. Two halves finding completion. The realization was dizzying. "The next part is more difficult," he said, regaining some of his composure. "We must allow our wolves to emerge partially. Enough to complete the bond, but maintaining human consciousness. It's a delicate balance. For most wolves, this would be challenging but achievable. For me, it was terrifying. My wolf had always been reluctant to surface since the trauma that stole my voice. On full moon runs, the mandatory shift would come upon me with painful slowness, as though my wolf feared what awaited in the outside world. Nikolai seemed to sense my apprehension. "I'll guide you," he promised. Leading me to the fur-draped platform at the center of the chamber, we sat facing each other, knees touching, our wounded wrists still pressed together. "Close your eyes. Find your wolf." I did as he instructed, my eyelids drifting shut as I turned my awareness inward. There she was, my wolf, curled protectively around the wounded part of my psyche where my voice had once lived. Usually she shied away from my attempts to connect, but tonight something was different. She raised her head, alert and interested in a way I had never experienced before. "It's safe," I told her silently. "He waits for us." I felt rather than saw Nikolai's partial shift beginning, a ripple of power that changed the very air between us. My wolf responded instinctively, pushing forward until I could feel my canines lengthening, my fingernails hardening into claws. The dual awareness was disorienting. Human mind and wolf instincts overlapping, neither fully in control. "Open your eyes," Nikolai growled, his voice deeper, rougher. When I did, I gasped. His face had shifted subtly, cheekbones more pronounced, jaw stronger, eyes blazing gold. Not a full shift, but his wolf clearly visible beneath the human features. Power radiated from him, a tangible force that pressed against my skin and called to my own wolf with irresistible authority. He raised our joined wrists between us. Now we complete the bond, wolf to wolf, soul to soul. His free hand cupped the back of my neck, drawing me forward until our foreheads touched. The contact sent a cascade of sensations flooding through me. His thoughts, his emotions, his very essence pouring into the spaces between my own. I saw flashes of his life, a childhood in another pack, the loss of his parents, the brutal training that had forged him into a leader, the constant vigilance of his years as alpha, and beneath it all, a loneliness that mirrored my own. a soul that understood silence because it too had learned to live within its confines. My wolf surged forward, breaking through barriers I hadn't even known existed. Suddenly, inexplicably, something snapped into place between us, a connection as tangible as the blood drying on our wrists. I could feel Nikolai's surprise and wonder echoing my own as the bond solidified, becoming a bridge between our minds. "Alara," he breathed, and in that single word I heard 1,000 questions answered. I felt it then, a presence in my mind, distinct from my own thoughts yet somehow harmonious with them. Nikolai, not invading, but invited, not conquering, but completing. "Can you hear me?" The question formed in my mind, directed across the newly formed bond. His sharp intake of breath was answer enough, but then his response came, not as sound but as certainty in my mind. "Yes, I hear you, Alara." The wonder of it brought tears to my eyes. 12 years of silence, broken not by the return of my physical voice, but by this miraculous connection that transcended ordinary speech. Through our bond, I could communicate completely, clearly, the thoughts forming and flowing from me to him without the clumsy mediation of written notes or hand gestures. "The legends were true," Nikolai said aloud, his voice thick with emotion. "True mates can hear each other's thoughts." "It's beautiful," I sent across our bond, unable to contain my joy. "I've been silent for so long." "Never again," he promised, his thumb gently wiping away a tear that had escaped down my cheek. "Never again will you go unheard, Alara." The intensity of the moment overwhelmed me. My wolf retreated slightly, allowing my features to return to fully human, though the bond remained strong between us. Nikolai followed suit, his own shift receding until only his eyes retained that otherworldly golden glow. We sat in silence for several minutes, adjusting to the strange new reality of shared consciousness. It wasn't a complete merging. I couldn't access his thoughts unless he deliberately projected them toward me, and I assumed the same was true in reverse. But the connection was there, a golden thread linking us across the void that had separated me from others for so long. "The council will have to accept you now," Nikolai said at last, a note of satisfaction in his voice. "The bond is stronger than any I've witnessed." "It's because we're true mates," I sent, testing the bond. The words flowed effortlessly from my mind to his. He nodded. "True mates are rare. My parents had such a bond. When my father died, my mother followed within days. She couldn't survive with half her soul torn away." A shadow crossed his face. "It's why I never sought a true mate." The vulnerability of it. "I understand fear," I sent gently, echoing his earlier words to me, "but perhaps there's strength in this connection too." His eyes searched mine, finding something there that seemed to ease the tension in his shoulders. "Perhaps," he conceded. "But there are those who will see it as weakness, who will target you to get to me." "The neighboring packs?" I asked. "Some," he acknowledged. "But there are threats closer to home as well. Not everyone in the Northern Pines welcomed my leadership when I took over from the previous Alpha. Some still resent an outsider holding power, like Diana and her father," I suggested, thinking of the red-haired woman who had made her disdain for me and her ambition for Nikolai's attention. So clear. A ghost of a smile touched his lips. "You see more than people realize, don't you?" "I've had years to observe," I replied. "When you don't speak, people forget you're listening. Their mistake," he said softly. "One I won't repeat." The candles had burned lower, casting longer shadows across the ceremonial chamber. Outside, the moon would be high in the sky now, its power at its peak. Within these walls, something equally powerful had been forged, a bond that defied the limitations of my silence and his solitude. "There's one more part to the ritual," Nikolai said, his voice dropping to a register that sent a shiver of anticipation down my spine. "If you're willing." The consummation. Even thinking the word sent heat flooding my cheeks. I had known this moment would come, had prepared myself for it in theory, but the reality of Nikolai, his strength, his intensity, the new intimacy of our mental connection, made theory pale in comparison. "I'm willing," I sent across our bond, surprised by my own certainty. "I want this. I want you." The last thought slipped through unintentionally, carried on a wave of emotion I hadn't meant to share. Nikolai's eyes darkened, the gold flaring brighter as his control slipped momentarily. "Are you certain?" he asked aloud, giving me the chance to reconsider. "Once done, there's no undoing it. We will be bound in every way possible." In answer, I reached for him, my fingers tracing the strong line of his jaw. "Yes," I projected, letting him feel my certainty, my desire, my trust, fragile but real. With a groan that seemed torn from somewhere deep inside him, Nikolai gathered me in his arms and lowered me gently onto the furs. His weight above me was substantial but not crushing, his body radiating heat that chased away the chill that had been my constant companion for so long. "Ilara," he whispered against my skin, my name a prayer and a promise on his lips. What followed was a revelation, a joining of bodies that echoed the joining of our minds and souls. Through our bond, Nikolai could feel my responses in a way no spoken word could have conveyed. He knew exactly when to be gentle, when to be fierce, when to pause and when to press forward, and I, for the first time in my life, could express my pleasure without stumbling over inadequate gestures or written words. Afterward, as we lay tangled in the furs, our heartbeats gradually slowing to a synchronized rhythm, I felt a sense of peace I hadn't known since childhood. Nikolai's arms around me created a sanctuary more secure than any I had found in my years of seeking the shadows. "The council meets at dawn," he murmured against my hair. "They will expect me to present my mate formally." His finger traced idle patterns on my bare shoulder. "Are you ready to stand beside me, Luna Ilara?" The title sent a tremor through me. Luna, the alpha female, the pack mother, the mediator and counselor. A role I had never imagined holding, with responsibilities I wasn't sure I could fulfill. "I'm afraid," I admitted across our bond. "What if the pack won't accept me?" "They'll accept you because I command it," Nikolai replied, a hint of the alpha's authority returning to his voice. "Then, more gently and in time, they'll accept you because you'll prove yourself worthy through your actions. But without a voice, you have a voice now," he interrupted, tapping his temple. "Here, with me. And for the rest," his expression softened into something I might almost have called tenderness. "We'll find a way, Ilara, together. Together." The word held new meaning now, weighted with promise and possibility. For so long I had existed apart, present but not participating, seen but not heard. Now, somehow, this powerful man had breached the walls of my isolation, offering a future I had never dared to imagine. As moonlight filtered through the high windows of the ceremonial chamber, painting silver patterns across our entwined forms, I allowed myself to hope. Tomorrow would bring challenges, the council's skepticism, the pack's judgment, the threats that Nikolai had only begun to reveal. But for this moment, in the sacred space between night and dawn, I was no longer alone, and neither was he. Dawn painted the sky in watercolor strokes of pink and gold when we emerged from the ceremonial chamber. Nikolai's hand rested protectively at the small of my back, a physical reminder of our new connection. I felt different, more substantial somehow, as if the bond had filled spaces within me I hadn't realized were empty. We had barely enough time to separate and prepare for the council meeting. A female attendant I didn't recognize was waiting outside my new chambers, the Luna's rooms, adjoining the Alpha's but with their own entrance. She helped me bathe and dress in clothes that had appeared overnight, garments befitting my new station, made of finer materials than I had ever worn. "These belonged to the previous Luna," the attendant explained, as she fastened the last button on a dress of deep forest green. "Elder Marin had them altered for you." I touched the soft fabric in wonder. The previous Luna had died years before Nikolai arrived, the former Alpha's mate, who had passed during a difficult childbirth, taking their unborn child with her. Her death had sent the former Alpha into a spiral of grief and poor decisions that had nearly destroyed the pack before his own passing. "I'm not sure I deserve these," I thought to myself, forgetting momentarily that Nikolai might hear me through our bond. His response came immediately, warm in my mind. "You deserve this, and more." The unexpectedness of it made me smile. This mental connection would take some getting used to, but already it felt natural, as though a part of me that had been missing had finally clicked into place. When I was ready, the attendant led me to the council chamber. The space fell silent as I entered, all eyes turning to assess the Alpha's unexpected choice. Nikolai already sat at the head of the long table, his expression impassive, but his eyes finding mine instantly. Through our bond, I felt his approval at my appearance and his determination to make this transition as smooth as possible. "Come sit beside me, Luna," he sent, deliberately using my new title. I crossed the room with as much dignity as I could muster, feeling the weight of scrutiny with each step. The chair to Nikolai's right, the Luna's traditional place, awaited me. As I took my seat, I was acutely aware of the contrast between yesterday and today. 24 hours ago, I had been virtually invisible within the pack hierarchy. Now I sat at its apex. "The bonding is complete," Nikolai announced without preamble. "Ilara is my mate and your Luna. I expect her to be treated with all the respect her position commands." Thaddeus, seated directly across from me, leaned forward. "And how is she to fulfill the Luna's duties?" "A Luna speaks for the females of the pack, mediates disputes, oversees the young one's education." "How can she do these things without a voice?" Before Nikolai could answer, I placed my hand on his arm. He glanced at me, one eyebrow raised in question. "Let me try to answer," I sent through our bond. His slight nod was all the permission I needed. I reached for the small notebook and pencil I had brought with me, quickly writing my response and sliding it across the table to Thaddeus. He read it aloud, his skepticism evident in his tone. "I may not speak, but I can listen. Sometimes that's what people need most. Pretty words, but leadership requires more than listening." I wrote again, my pencil moving swiftly. Thaddeus took the note with visible reluctance. "I've spent 12 years observing this pack from the shadows. I know its strengths and weaknesses, and now, through my bond with the Alpha, I have a voice when needed." He looked up sharply. "What does that mean?" "It means," Nikolai said, satisfaction coloring his words, "that our mating bond is stronger than anticipated. Ilara and I can communicate mind to mind. Her thoughts to me, mine to her." A murmur of surprise rippled around the table. Mental communication between mates wasn't unheard of, but it was rare, usually developing only after years of bonding, if at all. That Nikolai and I had established such a connection immediately spoke to the depth of our true mate bond. "If this is true," began an older female council member I knew as Valeria, "it changes matters considerably." "It is true," Nikolai confirmed. "Test it if you wish." Valeria considered me thoughtfully, then nodded. "Very well. Luna Ilara, if you truly can communicate with the Alpha this way, have him tell us something only you could know." I met her challenge by sending a memory across our bond, a detailed recollection of helping healer Leora treat Valeria's granddaughter after a hunting accident last winter, details that only those present would know, including the small carved fox the child had clutched throughout the painful treatment. Nikolai related these details to the council, his eyes never leaving mine as he spoke. Valeria's expression shifted from doubt to astonishment. "That's correct," she admitted. "Every detail." "The blood ritual doesn't make mistakes," healer Leora said from her place near the end of the table. "True mates are chosen by forces beyond our understanding. If the ritual recognized Ilara as the Alpha's mate despite her Omega status, perhaps we should consider that her perceived weakness may actually be her strength." I felt a rush of gratitude toward the healer. She had always treated me with kindness in the years I'd assisted her, but this public support meant more than she could know. Thaddeus remained unconvinced. "The neighboring packs won't understand. They'll see an Alpha mated to a mute Omega and assume weakness. The Blue Ridge pack has already been testing our borders. What message does this send to them?" "It sends the message that I choose strength that isn't immediately obvious," Nikolai countered, an edge entering his voice. "Ilara's value doesn't lie in her ability to growl the loudest or show her teeth. It lies in her perception, her healing abilities, and now in our bond." As they continued to debate, I observed the currents of power flowing around the table. Most seemed cautiously accepting, following healer Leora's lead. Thaddeus remained the most vocal opponent, though even he seemed to be considering the practicality of the mental bond, rather than rejecting my position outright. Only one council member remained conspicuously silent, a thin, gray-haired man named Cyrus, who had served as advisor to the previous Alpha. His gaze, when it rested on me, was calculating rather than hostile. Something about his attention made my wolf bristle with unease. "Watch that one," I sent to Nikolai, with a subtle tilt of my head toward Cyrus. "He's considering all the angles." Nikolai's response came with a trace of grim humor. He always does. Cyrus survives by backing whoever holds power. The council meeting continued, moving from my position to more routine pack matters: border patrols, upcoming hunts, preparations for winter. I listened attentively, absorbing information that would now be directly relevant to my new responsibilities. Occasionally, I would write a note or send a thought to Nikolai when I had something to contribute. To my surprise, several of my suggestions were met with thoughtful consideration rather than immediate dismissal. When I proposed using my knowledge of medicinal herbs to create stockpiles for the coming winter, Valeria nodded approvingly. When I suggested specific hunting grounds based on what I'd observed while gathering plants, even Thaddeus acknowledged the merit of the idea. By the meeting's end, a tentative acceptance had settled over the council. Not enthusiasm, certainly, but a willingness to wait and see how this unprecedented situation would unfold. As the council members filed out, Nikolai held me back with a light touch on my arm. "There's something else we need to discuss," he said once we were alone. "Something that couldn't be said in front of the others." I tilted my head questioningly. "There's been another incident at the northern border," he said, his expression darkening. "A patrol found signs of intruders from the Blue Ridge Pack, not just marking territory this time, but actually crossing into our lands." Concern flickered through me. The Blue Ridge Pack had been our main rivals for generations, their territory adjoining ours to the north. Under their new alpha, a ruthless wolf named Varian, tensions had escalated from the usual territorial posturing to something more dangerous. "Why now?" I asked through our bond. "Is it because of me? Because they see me as weakness?" "No," Nikolai said firmly. "This has been brewing for months. Varian wants to expand his territory, and our lands are rich in game." His jaw tightened, but our mating ceremony might have accelerated his timeline. "If he believes the pack is divided over my choice of Luna, he doesn't know about our bond," I pointed out. "We have an advantage." A smile tugged at the corner of his mouth. "You think strategically. Good." He rose from his chair, moving to a map of pack territories pinned to the wall. "I've doubled patrols along this ridgeline, but we can't cover every possible approach. Sooner or later, they'll make a more significant move." The memory of my parents' bodies flashed unbidden through my mind, torn and bloody from defending these same borders 12 years ago. Nikolai caught the edge of the memory through our bond, his expression softening as he returned to my side. "I'm sorry," he said quietly. "I forgot that's how you lost them." "It's why I understand the threat," I replied, pushing aside the painful memory. "What can I do to help? For now, establish yourself with the pack. The stronger our united front appears, the less likely Varian is to risk a direct confrontation." His hand found mine, our fingers intertwining naturally. "Tonight, we'll hold a formal presentation to introduce you as Luna. It's traditional and necessary to solidify your position." The thought of standing before the entire pack sent a wave of anxiety through me. Nikolai must have felt it across our bond, because he squeezed my hand reassuringly. "I'll be beside you," he promised. "You don't have to speak. Your presence will be enough." We spent the rest of the morning touring the pack house, Nikolai showing me areas I'd never been permitted to enter before. The Alpha's study became our study. The private council room became a space where my opinion held weight. The kitchens, where I had sometimes helped during major pack celebrations, now fell silent as I entered, the staff uncertain how to treat the Omega, who had suddenly become their Luna. "Give them time," Nikolai advised as we left yet another group of startled pack members. "It's a significant change for everyone." Around midday, we ventured into the pack grounds, the collection of smaller homes surrounding the main pack house where most of the northern Pines wolves lived. Children who had been playing stopped to stare as we passed. Adults offered hesitant bows and curtsies, their expressions ranging from curious to concerned to openly hostile. One face in particular caught my attention. Diana, watching from the doorway of her family's substantial home. Her father was a wealthy merchant who had supplied the pack with goods from human towns for decades. The position had given their family influence second only to the alphas, and Diana had clearly been raised to expect a matching high-status mate. The hatred in her eyes as she watched us pass sent a chill down my spine. She blames me for taking what she believes should have been hers. I sent to Nikolai. She had her chance at the ceremony, he replied dismissively. The blood ritual rejected her. But she doesn't accept that, I insisted. She's dangerous. Nikolai glanced in Diana's direction, his expression hardening slightly. Perhaps, but not as dangerous as she thinks she is. By the time we returned to the pack house, word of our mental bond had spread. Pack members watched us with new speculation in their eyes, whispering behind their hands as we passed. I caught fragments of conversations, some expressing wonder at the strength of our mating bond, others questioning what it meant for pack dynamics. They'll adjust, Nikolai said as we climbed the steps to the pack house. Wolves are adaptable by nature. I hoped he was right. Tonight would be my first true test as Luna, standing before the pack, unable to speak, yet expected to lead. The irony wasn't lost on me. As we reached the entrance, one of the border patrol wolves came running up the path, his expression urgent. He bowed hastily before addressing Nikolai. Alpha, we've captured an intruder at the northern boundary. A scout from the Blue Ridge pack. Nikolai's posture changed instantly, tension radiating from him. Bring him to the holding cells. I'll interrogate him immediately. The guard hesitated. There's something else, Alpha. He was carrying this. He held out a small leather pouch. Nikolai took it, opening it carefully. Inside was a lock of ash-blonde hair tied with a black ribbon. He showed it to me, his expression grave. It's my hair, I realized with a jolt of fear. The shade is unmistakable. How did they get this? Nikolai demanded. Unknown, Alpha, the guard replied. But there was a message with it. He handed over a small scroll. Nikolai unrolled it, his face darkening as he read the contents. Without a word, he passed it to me. The message was brief, but chilling. The weak link breaks first. Your mate for our territory. Choose wisely, Alpha. A heavy silence fell over us, as the implications of the message sank in. Nikolai's eyes met mine, a storm brewing in their amber depths. Prepare the interrogation room, he ordered the guard, his voice dangerously calm, and double the patrols at all borders. No one enters or leaves our territory without my direct approval. As the guard hurried away, Nikolai turned to me, his expression softening slightly. You should return to our chambers. I'll handle this. I shook my head firmly. This threat was aimed at me specifically, which meant I needed to understand it fully. We're mates now, I reminded him through our bond. Your fights are my fights. A conflict played across his features, the protective alpha warring with the mate who had promised to see me as an equal. Finally, he nodded. Stay behind me, and if I signal you to leave, you go immediately. Understood? I nodded, grateful for his trust. The holding cells were located beneath the pack house, accessible through a heavy wooden door that led to a stone staircase. The space below was cool and dimly lit, with 3 barred cells along one wall and an open area containing a single sturdy chair. 2 guards stood at attention as we descended, their postures stiffening at the alpha's approach. In the center cell, a man sat on the simple cot, his posture relaxed despite his captivity. He wore the dark gray clothing favored by the Blue Ridge pack, his dark hair pulled back from a face that might have been handsome, if not for the calculating coldness in his eyes. Those eyes tracked our entrance, widening slightly when they landed on me. So the rumors are true, he said, his voice carrying the rougher accent of the Northern Territories. The mighty Alpha Nikolai has taken a mute Omega as his Luna. His gaze traveled over me with insulting thoroughness, though I can see certain compensations for her deficiencies. Nikolai's growl reverberated through the stone chamber, his control slipping momentarily. Watch your tongue, Scout, or lose it. The prisoner smirked, unintimidated. I'm merely appreciating the Alpha's taste in females. No offense intended. Where did you get this? Nikolai demanded, holding up the lock of my hair. The Scout's smile widened. Wouldn't you like to know? It seems your pack's security isn't as impenetrable as you believe, Alpha. An image flashed through my mind. Diana, who had made a point of bumping into me at the last full moon gathering, her hand brushing against my hair in what I'd thought was an accidental collision. Had she been collecting a sample even then, planning for this moment? I sent the memory to Nikolai, whose expression darkened further as he received it. "Diana," he muttered, low enough that only I could hear. Then, louder, to the prisoner. "You're working with someone inside our pack." It wasn't a question, but the scout's slight hesitation before answering confirmed it. "Alpha Varian has allies everywhere," he said smoothly. "People who recognize true strength when they see it." "And what does Varian want?" Nikolai pressed, though we already knew the answer. "Your territory, primarily," the scout replied with shocking candor. "But he's willing to be reasonable. Surrender the mute Luna to him as a gesture of submission, and he'll allow the Northern Pines to continue under your leadership. As a satellite of the Blue Ridge Pack, of course." My blood ran cold at his words. Not because of the threat to me, but because of what it revealed about Varian's strategy. He wasn't just testing our borders, he was testing our unity. Using me as the wedge to drive between Nikolai and those in the pack who might already question his choice of mate. Nikolai must have reached the same conclusion, for I felt a wave of cold fury radiate through our bond. "And if I refuse?" the scout shrugged. "Then Alpha Varian will take both your territory and your Luna anyway." But with considerably more bloodshed. His gaze shifted to me. "It's nothing personal, sweetheart. You're just the weakest link in an otherwise strong chain." Before Nikolai could respond, I stepped forward, moving to stand directly before the cell. The scout's eyes widened slightly, surprise flickering across his features at my boldness. "Ilara," Nikolai began, but I silenced him with a gentle pressure through our bond. I studied the scout carefully, taking in details that might have escaped notice. The quality of his clothing, too fine for a mere border patrol. The signet ring partially hidden on his left hand, marking him as someone of higher rank. The confidence that came not from bravado but from knowing his position was secure. "He's no ordinary scout," I sent to Nikolai. "He's someone important, possibly related to Varian himself." Nikolai's eyes narrowed as he reassessed our prisoner. "You're Varian's brother," he said suddenly. "Evander." The scout, Evander, couldn't quite hide his shock before mastering his expression. "Very good, Alpha. My reputation precedes me." "Your reputation as Varian's enforcer, yes," Nikolai agreed grimly. "Which means this isn't just a scouting mission. It's the prelude to an attack." Evander's smile never reached his eyes. "Let's just say my brother prefers to explore diplomatic options before resorting to less civilized methods." I turned away from the cell, tugging at Nikolai's arm to indicate we should speak privately. He followed me to the far corner of the chamber, keeping his body between me and our prisoner. "This isn't just about territory," I sent urgently. "It's about you. About undermining your authority." Nikolai nodded, his expression grave. "Varian has always been threatened by my leadership. Taking you would be a dual victory for him, humiliating me while eliminating the evidence of our true mate bond." Because a true mate bond makes you stronger, I realized. It's why he's moving now, before our bond becomes common knowledge among the packs. "Exactly," Nikolai murmured, "but he's miscalculated badly." His confidence warmed me, but I couldn't shake the fear that had lodged in my chest. Not for myself, but for what this meant for the pack, for the wolves who would die defending territory if Varian attacked. For the innocent lives that would be disrupted or destroyed in the power struggle between alphas. "There has to be a way to resolve this without bloodshed," I insisted. Nikolai's expression softened as he looked down at me. "Always the healer," he said, with a tenderness that still surprised me, "but some wounds can only be treated by removing the source of infection." He turned back to Evander, his posture straightening as he resumed the mantle of Alpha. "You'll return to your brother with a message," he stated, his tone allowing no argument. "The Northern Pines Pack stands united behind their Alpha and Luna. Any attack on our territory or our people will be met with the full force of our strength." Evander's smile turned predatory. "Is that your final answer, Alpha? Consider carefully. My brother's offer is more generous than you deserve." "It's my answer," Nikolai confirmed, and to ensure the message reaches Varian intact. He nodded to the guards, who opened the cell. "You'll bear my mark as a reminder of the consequences of trespassing on Northern Pines land." What followed was a swift, brutal display of dominance, Nikolai's claws leaving shallow but distinct furrows across Evander's right cheek. The wounds weren't life-threatening, but they would scar, a permanent reminder of his failure and Nikolai's power. "Take him to the northern border and release him," Nikolai ordered the guards. "Make sure he crosses back into Blue Ridge territory." As they led the prisoner away, I felt a strange mix of emotions. Concern at the escalation, pride in Nikolai's strength, and a growing certainty that the coming days would test our new bond in ways we couldn't yet imagine. We ascended the stairs in silence, each lost in thought. It wasn't until we reached our private chambers that Nikolai spoke. "We need to address the pact tonight," he said, pacing the length of the room. "Make it clear that any collaboration with Varian or his allies will be considered treason." "And Diana?" I asked, unable to keep the concern from my mental voice. "If she's involved, we'll deal with her," he promised grimly. "But first, we need to present a united front. The formal introduction of my Luna can't wait, not with Varian already moving against us." The remainder of the afternoon passed in a blur of preparation. Word of the captured scout spread through the pack like wildfire, along with rumors of Diana's possible involvement. She was brought in for questioning, but maintained her innocence with such conviction that even Nikolai was left uncertain. "She gave me nothing," he admitted when he returned to our chambers. "If she did take your hair, she covered her tracks well." By sunset, the great hall of the pack house had been transformed for my formal introduction. Torches lined the walls, casting golden light across the gathered pack members. Every wolf in the Northern Pines territory had been summoned, and their collective energy, a mixture of curiosity, concern, and cautious acceptance, filled the space like a physical presence. I wore a gown of deep silver, the traditional color for a Luna's presentation. My grandmother's wooden pendant hung at my throat, a reminder of who I was and where I had come from, regardless of my new status. Nikolai stood beside me in formal alpha attire, his presence a steadying force as we prepared to face the pack together. "Ready?" he asked quietly, offering his arm. I nodded, summoning all my courage as I slipped my hand into the crook of his elbow. "We're stronger together," I reminded myself. "Our bond makes us both stronger." As we entered the great hall, a hush fell over the assembled wolves. Hundreds of eyes tracked our progress to the raised platform at the far end. I kept my head high, focusing on projecting calm confidence despite the anxiety churning beneath. Nikolai addressed the pack with the natural authority that made him such an effective leader. He spoke of the true mate bond revealed at the ceremony, of the rare mental connection we shared, and of the unity needed in the face of threats from beyond our borders. "The Blue Ridge pack believes they have found weakness in our ranks," he declared, his voice carrying to every corner of the hall. "They believe that my choice of Luna reveals vulnerability they can exploit." His hand found mine, fingers intertwining. "They are gravely mistaken." A murmur passed through the crowd, some supportive, others still skeptical. "Luna Alara may not speak with her voice," Nikolai continued, "but her strength, her wisdom, and her heart speak volumes. Through our bond, I have seen her courage, her dedication to this pack, and her unfailing compassion even for those who have shown her none." His gaze swept meaningfully over certain faces in the crowd. Any who doubt her worthiness to stand as Luna challenge not just her position, but mine as Alpha. I felt the weight of the moment, the crossroads at which our pack stood. Division would make us vulnerable to Varian's threats. Unity would give us the strength to withstand whatever came, and somehow, improbably, I had become the symbol around which that unity must form. Drawing a deep breath, I stepped forward, gently releasing Nikolai's hand. This was my moment to claim my place, not just as his mate, but as Luna in my own right. From around my neck, I removed my grandmother's pendant. Holding it before me where all could see, I closed my eyes and did something I hadn't attempted since the trauma that stole my voice. I called to my wolf. She came willingly, eagerly, rising to just beneath the surface of my consciousness. Not a full shift, but enough that when I opened my eyes again, I knew they had changed to the silver that marked my wolf form, The pendant began to glow between my fingers, not with external light, but with the inner luminescence of pack magic, ancient and powerful. It was a manifestation of the true Luna spirit, one that appeared rarely and only when the pack stood at a crucial turning point. A collective gasp rose from the assembled wolves. Even Nikolai looked stunned beside me. I turned to face the pack, my pack now, and though no sound passed my lips, my intent was clear. I would stand with them, fight for them, lead them with Nikolai, creating strength from what others perceived as weakness. One by one, the wolves began to kneel, heads bowing in recognition and acceptance. Even Diana, her expression unreadable, bent her knee at last. As the final wolf submitted, I felt something shift in the energy of the room, a coming together, a unification of purpose that swept through the pack like a cleansing wind. Whatever came next, whether Varian's aggression or internal dissent, we would face it not as Alpha and Silent Omega, but as true mates whose bond transcended the limitations of voice and status. Nikolai's hand found mine again, his pride flowing warm and strong through our bond. "My Luna," he said simply, for all to hear. And in the minds of everyone present, my response echoed with unmistakable clarity. "Always."